morning, ladies. We are welcoming today Sonia, Malenka, Pat, Monique, and I'm Svenja. So we're here today to talk about organizations from the psychic perspective, in Auroville in particular, but also in general, actually in any kind of relationship. So now the first question to get this conversation going would be, how do you personally relate to the three statements that are at the basis of the creation of Auroville by the Mother? To be a true Aurovillian, the dream, and the charter.
When I consider Mother's words about taking advantage of all researches from within and from without, that is so exciting. And it's a beautiful vision to think of an organization or a relationship or an individual life that is keeps that in mind. A lot of freedom is needed for individual researches to be expressed in, but then also a lot of compassion, patience, giving, because we are a very diverse group of people. Not everybody's inner research yields the same thing. However, once we get to some level, we touching the truth of the supramental, the psychic, we can start to merge. For making choices about organizing daily life, about architecture, about organization, it is interesting to look at researches that are going on and are well known. I give one example and I close. In the area of music and mathematics, and quantum mechanics is related to this, but in music, it is well known that singing together actually makes a change in the brain and builds a part of the brain that is responsible for joy and interactive behavior. I've thought about how, just for myself, just to hum would make me connect more with my inner being. And I've often thought that it would be nice to start meetings with a group hum. Not an om so much as just a humming. I won't say more about this. The research is all over the internet. But let's think about the organisms that we are, that present right now at this point in evolution. What can we do to enhance the capacities that we've been given and which make us just the right creature right now to carry this evolution forward? And I'm suggesting just one thing. Take a look at the research involving music and see how that could really affect our entire life, as it has done in other countries in the world.
Yeah, for me, the charter is still the most important part of everything. And I think we are still trying to really manifest that. And I think that's the base. You need the base of getting out of this is mine, and I really hope that we can proceed with seeing Auroville as for the humanity as a whole. For me, I'm also quite interested, like of course I resonate with being a true Aurovillian. I resonate very much with the dream. And my interest is starting to grow also with, in the dream, they be talking about Auroville being the base, the cradle of the Superman. And I for very long, I couldn't deal. I said, yeah, that's too far reached, that's too far. And understanding a little bit more of the writings of Sri Aurobindo, it would originate and grow from this psychic, from your psychic, and that's the only way. And I think we could develop, and talking about unending education, talking about taking advantage of knowledge, people from within and without. I would really love to see more possibilities to develop that, to teach the kids. They have it so much, but it's not really developed enough. And the outer world is talking about superhumans, like doing it with technology. And I really think that all technology is doing is copying what we have potentially inside of ourselves. And I have a think that I would love to see that developing more in Auroville. Like we have so many qualities. We have internet, but before we had internet, before we have television, I would know that my daughter or somebody would be near to me, or that's, you can say telepathy, but we have this capacity so much inside ourselves. And we're forgetting it, we're becoming lazy because we have the technology. It was nice to have the last few days without internet. It's still not restored. But for that we need peace and capacity to have this inner communication with our psychic. I don't know if it's my psychic really or if it's my intuition, but there have been very many times in my life that I had to make important decisions. And asking in meditation, asking for some time for guidance, that there comes the answer. And that might not be necessary at all what I like. Very often it's the opposite of the more convenient kind. But it was the most basic and most important decisions in my life, like to stay in Auroville or not, or so that is there. To put it into practice in organization, I think we are still in baby shoes on that. I've been sitting in many groups, like now I'm in part of the entry service now. I've been part of the council, part of housing. There was always some practical solutions to be needed. Then you go more into opinions or rules, or being in an organizational body is not necessarily helping to bring the psychic forward, I think. There has to be another, like maybe something like this, the wise women together to bring, like in the old cultures, the people that have lived a life and people that have made their mistakes and people that have listened to the psychic or the inner truth, and also the moments when they had not listened to the inner truth, so they learned what is the difference. And what are those moments? How does it feel to be in touch with your psychic? How is it for everybody different? But it has that very particular reality of something that's more real than reality. I think that like, yeah, this is true. So we have not cultivated. And I think I came to Auroville hoping that we would be able to cultivated in peace and in thing. And I think we can still progress very much on this in the future. But we have been basically planting trees and setting up systems, setting up social systems, setting out financial systems. And that's true. And now it's hopefully the time that we can go into seeing how can we actually put up psyche into... There were moments, I know it was there, but it's sporadic for my experience through the years.
Yeah, I can resonate with Sonia on this. For me, it's also mainly the charter and being the willing servitor of the divine consciousness, which is, for me, the most important, and which brings me really to my inner side, my inner being, and my way of trying to live through this. And yes, we need to go through mental processes in certain areas, but I think more it goes, more we are capable of connecting to our inner self, to connecting to a higher guidance, and finding the right way. Yes, and maybe this women power will also be part of it, because we are supposed to be more intuitive and more closer to our inner being, and not being so much of a logical construction, of a mental construction. And yes, this storm over the past days has definitely helped us in a way of cutting off our internet connections, and let's try and find another connection.
You were talking about families or children and having an aspiration that they be involved in evolving here consciously. That's how I heard you. And as a midwife, I'm most attracted to the ideas of children coming into the world being supported in their spiritual unfolding in a conscious, intentional way. And so we've been wanting to finally build a birth center here. One of the first buildings the mother wanted here was in Pumice, was for the women to give birth in Auroville, from this honoring place, this place of knowing that babies aren't just bodies, but they've got something that needs to be nurtured, and it's the psychic being. And so as I look at Auroville, and we're here as a group of women, people of the womb, and we are carrying forth not just the children, but the culture for the children to be inside of. And so I'm aspiring with the mothers and the fathers to create a culture that raises babies into full-grown adults that are very embodied and listening to their inner being. And that starts preconception, that starts during pregnancy, that starts as you birth in a space that is honoring of the female, which unfortunately is not happening anymore. It stopped this year. We used to have home births, and now Tamil Nadu is requiring all births 100% be in institution. So we are trying to build an institution called the Birth Center, which has all the feelings of home that we can create. It's not home, but at least have that kind of empowered way of being, and that has been stopped here. So it's been quite a battle for us women, and I don't think Aurovillians are aware of what it's been like for families. Many women are now leaving to go birth in Europe and back in the West, and not doing it here, because what they experience is quite brutal. There's plenty of obstetrical violence happening in the hospitals. We go with them to the hospitals, but they have protocols that we have to bend to, and they're inhuman. And so I'm wanting to get this building built and continue with our process of being inside the question, how do we evolve a consciousness on Earth? And my belief is that it happens through the people coming in, new babies, and that the vision for this birth and family center is that we actually address our parenting and really look at, are we parenting in a way that before the age of 6, when the prefrontal cortex really comes online for an infant, the first 6 years, that child is a sponge and is just sponging up unconsciously because their brainwaves are slower and they're kind of in a hypnotic state. That's why they're sponging up all of their parents' subconscious behaviors and words and beliefs. So if we can get to them before they get to preschool and have a way of supporting parents. We do a lousy job of supporting parents here in Auroville so that mothers can actually be with their children and fathers can have time for the children off from work. We don't have that consciousness here yet, but we need to shift that so that we can support this work that gets done before kids are forgetting that they are souls, which is happening around 5, 6, and 7 years of age. So this birth center to me would be not just a place to give birth with grace and with consciousness and with dignity and honoring of the power of coming to this world. Not only is it for that physiological, spiritual event, but it's also to support the parents postpartum. So for many, the first week is very, very difficult learning to breastfeed, getting the baby in a sleeping pattern, that, the parents are exhausted, to going from that state of survival into a graceful state of now, how do we raise these babies and that the mothers and fathers feel supported so that they're not in deep stress, which is one of the first things that helps us to forget the psychic being, is when we're fearful, when we're stressed out, when we're unsupported, when we're not behaving as a collective as we should with the consciousness for the families. And so this birth center, birth and family center, will, in my vision, have, in the vision of my team, support fathers, support mothers to stay conscious and to understand what's going to unfold from here on out in the next few years, and support that launching of these children so that we really mentor in the awareness of the psychic being from the very, very get-go. So that might look like in the morning at home, maybe they are praying, or maybe they're some form of an acknowledgement of the divine inside their being, and there's so many ways to do that, but I would love for that to be an ethic here in Auroville, to really honor and understand the psychology and the physiology and the spirituality of new beings here. So we do a good job with our children, who will turn into our teenagers, who will turn into our adults, and we'll be running the show here, and hopefully from the psychic being.
For me, I want to say initially that remembering what I'm here for, not just here in Auroville, but in my life, in my body, on this planet. And it's to be aware of the divine, God, however you want to term that creator of all. Now, there are many different ways that people approach this, but I think it's very crucial, at least it is for me, to keep that in mind so that the voice in the head that we all have is not simply about, where am I going shopping today? Did I forget my grocery list and what have you? But to know that that voice in the head is either coming from one side or the other, from light or from darkness, from God or from evil. Call it the devil, call it whatever you want to call it. And we were given the choice when we were created to choose what to listen to. So for me, that's the first thing that's important to start. From the time of conception through pregnancy, childbirth, the young child, soaking up whatever is in its atmosphere, that is known. I know my mother did a great job in doing that with me. She consecrated me to God before I was even conceived. So not everybody is perhaps that fortunate, but it doesn't matter, because at any point in your life, you can turn towards the voice in the head that's coming from the side of the light. So now I must say, remembering the advice, the commandment that you should love God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and right in the same sentence at the end of that, and love your neighbor as yourself. So that's acknowledgement of what we're here for and how we should behave. We get to choose at every instant. Call it the soul, call it the psychic being, the voice that's coming from the light. I don't think that's important. It's not relevant what we call it. But to have that choice, and I see in my own life how I start out with that aspiration every morning, but the day doesn't go by before I fell. I fall into maybe speaking sharply, maybe being impatient, maybe forgetting that that person in front of me is the same. That's the oneness that Mother's talking about, human unity. That for me is loving your neighbor as yourself. Human unity. We're all in this together. And as far as Auroville, we all came here, seems to me, in funny different ways. Some consciously on purpose, and some sort of just dropping in and staying. That also doesn't really matter. It's recognizing that you're here and you have a certain potential, as well as your free will, your choice. You have a potential to be that willing servitor of the divine that you mentioned, and to be used by that. So I can only say in closing that, in my opinion, listening to the voice in the mind, in the head, that leads you towards the high road.
Love your neighbor. I really like that. And I think also in terms of organization, that's what we may be lacking here in Auroville, because we have so many conflicts. I remember having been in the housing service, in the council. I was on the conflict resolution council. That was always the sparkling point where conflicts were arising amongst neighbors. And if we could educate ourselves with being in touch with ourselves, being already in love with ourselves, being able to love others, maybe we could look at this conflict situation in a different way, and without running to outside organizations, asking them to solve problems for us, trying to deal with us or with it on a different level. I think that would be a nice start for an organization from a psychic being.
Yeah, basically being part of this organization, the present organization, is, now I smile because what I've learned over almost 10 years being part of that is that it's the perfect school to see how you work from your ego and the experience what it means to hold power, and how all your basic values from your own culture come forward, and kind of wish that it worked in your own culture, and then you realize that you can't apply it to this culture here, to Auroville culture. It's I think those forms of organizations are really there for us to learn how it should not happen. It's like learning by mistakes. And we know it doesn't work. It never has worked. We are 56 years further now. And we haven't found yet a way of organizing. It's like a school for learning the disadvantages of doing it that way. And we are still, hopefully, when everybody has had their turn, and many different people had their turn to take that responsibility and basically not being very effective, and not effective of creating this human unity or creating a situation where you could actually. I know when I had one moment of being in touch with my psychic in about the first week when I started in the housing service, and later I only got into stress, and that doesn't really help. But there are other ways, and I think we are still there, and we still have time to find other ways, and this might be part of it. Talking about children and soul, it was very interesting to hear my grandson of 5 saying, "Can you explain me what is soul? Does everything has a soul? Does animals have a soul?" You know, it is still inherent, it is still there, and I think the kids in Auroville still have a lot of opportunity definitely up to the 6 or 7 that is actually going to do. I remember walking here with him, and then we were in a beautiful place in nature, and just out of the blue, and I think he was only 3, say, "Oh, this is a very good place to meditate." So they feel, they know, and we should give. I know they get in the kindergarten, they get some. They get some of exposure to it, but we could even do more. And I try to do it. I have 2 beautiful grandchildren. I really love to help getting them, but no blue screen, no television, no screen time, and I think that's very healthy.
Somebody asked me once if I was in touch with my psychic being. What a question. I think yes. I think, in fact, that everyone has a moment now and then that they're in touch with the psychic being. Enlightenment is like a butterfly. It lands on you, and there you are, in the light. We don't keep it. Why we don't keep it, that would be another huge topic. Maybe we cannot at the present moment. But it comes, and you know when it's there, because things are brighter, things are more clear, and there's a certain joy that comes, and you feel like, that's it, now I've got it right finally. This is it. And then we get a chance to start again, constantly, because that thing is coming and going. I think it's called the grace of God.
We were talking about that there are ways collectively to connect at the psychic being. I mean, if we're looking at technologies or information from the outside, there's lots of different processes that people have in order to communicate in a way that is heartfelt. From the psychic being. So. In my dreaming into the possible, and as I have experienced other communities, my whole adult life has been in a few different communities, and so I'm thinking about the privilege of the people that live in Findhorn, and when I lived there, they did something called attunement, and attunement was using silence and finding little pieces of what we saw in the silent meditation, and then only speaking from that. And because the pace was slower, we had a good amount of time to spend in silence. It wasn't about the ego proving its point to the other person, but it was basically really honoring that something wants to use me and speak through me. And the Quakers do that. The Quakers will sit in silent circle and won't speak until they know for sure it's coming from the higher place. And I can think of a number of other examples. Here's another one. In my community, it's Sirius. When I lived there, Sirius is an offshoot of Findhorn in Massachusetts. I remember that a bunch of us learned transformational kinesiology. It was based on the teachings of Alice Bailey. And what we did is we muscle tested to see who gets to speak next. And like, oh, there's somebody on that side that needs to speak. Oh, it's to the left or to the right. And it's like, oh, me? And then that person would say, well, all I can think of or all I see is this or that. And it would be like, yeah, that's very interesting. And so all of a sudden what you would see in this conversation that was, kinesiology is based on muscles responding to what is already in the field. So what you start to notice is that there's a conversation, a collective conversation in the field. We already kind of are plugged into our solutions already. The idea is to just be so in tune with those solutions that we can collectively tell the conversation of this solution making. So one of the things of interest in that is when we got to a place where we couldn't think of what was next, when we were blocked and we were trying to solve a big problem together. And we would just go into silence, and maybe we would point our hands upwards and say, okay, Divine, give us some insight. And inevitably, something out of far left field, outside the box that none of our IQs could hit, would spring up. Like, oh, yeah, we could do this or that. Oh, I never thought of that. And you could see that the Divine was almost being asked to play along concretely with us. And the energy, the way that I would feel leaving that kinesiology collective session, or the energy of me leaving an attunement in Findhorn or a Quaker meeting, I felt elevated, I felt lighter, connected in love. And it was never adversarial. That was not the deal. The deal is, imagine that at the door it says, leave your ego at the door. And then you come into the collective room, and the purpose of it is to do the unity. Like, don't speak a word unless it's coming from that aspiration. So, and what I know about, let's say, those places that I've mentioned, is that they had the privilege of concentrating on shadow work, on defining, well, what is the ego and how does it really show up in me? And then do the work of honestly looking at the stuff that's inhibiting me from staying connected to a higher dimension. And so they had the time for that. And when I compare those places or other places to Auroville, and I see like, okay, so Aurovillians came here, the land was barren, we needed trees. There were not enough funds to hurry up and make schools. Things had to unfold in a slower kind of pace. And then on top of that, all this cross-cultural stuff, that were embedded in a culture where 60 different nations and a third of the population is Indian, and all of that kind of slowed the pace of a certain kind of spiritual psychology. And so the spiritual psychology of knowing how to tune in very carefully to what is from my psychic being and have those finer distinctions, that takes time and devotion, and that takes a silence and a quieting. And on this land, there was a lot of hurry up and get a tree going, hurry up and get, water the tree, take care of the people, and just kind of survive. So I think what's happening here in Auroville is we're getting to a maturation where we could potentially have more quiet and really organize our inner being around a devotion to that truth in a consistent way, because we're not so deterred by the material needs and survival needs. So now we do have that privilege of going inward. And so I would love to have a vision of Auroville where whenever we come together to actually do practice of human unity and say make decisions or look at problems or just think together, feel together, that when we walk in the door over the top says, leave your ego at the door. And then as you enter into collective space, you know that this is holy space. We are together. Now let's co-create with the divine in a practice of what we really are in truth, which is a collective conversation of love. And so that is my vision, and I almost know that of course is where we're going. And we will leave behind on the other side of the door all the defenses that we learned because of trauma, let's say post-Second World War, and all of our egoic ways of trying to achieve and make money, and all that. We will have the skills. We will collectively mature into the skills of leaving all of that. It's kind of like a sadness, that needs some sort of defending, and just leave all of that, and then come into space together from just joy of being together, because that's why we live collectively, because it's fun and it's beautiful.
I really love this notion about leaving the ego outside the door. So in a community, how can we, or here in Auroville, how can we achieve that concretely? Without using the ego, without using the mind, by using our connection. That's the question I'm with since I just heard you, Monique. And there's a blank in terms of answer. There's absolutely nothing. So, but I think that's the real point, that's the real question you just addressed. Yeah, I don't know.
Although we are a large group, we are communities within community, we are first of all individuals. And I think the answer to that is that each one with his free will has to choose and ask, because we are always heard. The divine is always just waiting for us to turn and say our question, or simply help. At last you ask, why did you wait so long? So we can have answers, and they may not be in the form that we're used to, but you get the feeling, and you have suddenly an insight, call it an intuition or an answer, whatever. So if we want to talk about organizations, groups, surely it would help if before the group begins its work, whatever that may be, if there was a request, call it a meditation or a prayer, where you say, help, we need help. We have this knot and we have to find a way to untie it. Help us see the way. And it will come. I know this from experience. It might not come like in an instant, but it does come. And you know. It isn't a faithful knowing, it's a real knowing, because you are heard. And that has just been waiting for you to ask. Now, about the ego. Sri Aurobindo said the ego is the helper, yet the ego is the bar. So to ask for wisdom, to know when to listen to the ego, like if I'm going to paint a picture, I need that ego. Maybe, maybe not, but there are times when the ego comes into its own use, what it's supposed to be used for. But mostly it is the bar, because it gets us to believing that we're in charge, and we're not. So if we ask together as a group for guidance, and protection, we will get it.
Regarding the original framework of the 3 documents that guide Auroville's progress, there seems to be, and my own experience, I want to find nurturing for psychic growth. My understanding is that as the psychic contact grows, there would naturally be less and less dependence on the mind for decisions. The mind could become a very useful tool, but the real guidance would be coming from the psychic, and that would be laying the groundwork for the next being, which is mentioned as the mandate for Auroville. So, if, to the extent possible, that we could actually help each other practice so that we learn individually, take a cue from the kids, of course, who are not tainted yet, but learn to connect first. Let's check in first to see what's going on, not going instantly to the mind. And this is my habitual thing. And I see how much trouble it gets, and it's totally unreliable, except in basic things. Something else is obviously taking care, and my mind doesn't get to call the shots all the time. To live in a place where a person can walk out of the house in kind of a seeking mode, a little bit unsettled because of some issue that lays on the heart. And the first thing that happens, or the second or third, would be just a chance encounter, a conversation. And some answer is given. So already we have all that happening here. And I think it's because the supremely conscious force of love is surrounding us, and because the supramental is very active and supporting, and we're just to lose the habit of going into the mind, the separate place. To notice what happens when you do that, how it can take you so far afield and into so much trouble and division. So the guidance from the beautiful documents that we have to guide our lives are quite thorough. We just don't yet, I don't yet, have not yet reached the depth, the real depth of their meaning. And it's as if every year they become, oh, I see why this is necessary. I see what's behind this. And that itself, this just living here, it doesn't always on the surface seem to be nurturing. And yet, under pressure is when progress is made. And so wouldn't we say that everything is just the way it needs to be, and the individual and collective response is now what we have to really look for. Watch out for that. I want more nurturing through the senses, through senses that are not assaulted, for example, by words or things I see. And yet, I realize that those are helping me grow. So this is just a kind of a workaround, thinking about what we really have here. What is the potential, the frustration of not being the entity that I am told is possible for myself, and seeing what I think might be an error or something against psychic enhancement. It's a long game, and those 3 documents are truly, truly a guide. We could spend a lot more time together with those as individuals, but how lovely in a group setting of just coming together and somehow somebody would feel what to do and let the psychic take charge of what's the next thing to do. Although words themselves bring one so dangerously out into the mind and mental areas, it's nice that we have words, but in a multicultural place, it's kind of interesting that we don't all understand the same words the same way. So how much importance can we put on words anyway? So I want to be able to be the person that someone could speak with and know that they catch a response from whatever I can muster as a true place to whatever they might be experiencing when I perceive that it is something beautiful and brilliant. Mental judgment, I guess. We do have discernment, and we don't have to listen to everything or pay attention to everything. But when it comes back to the 3 documents particularly, as well as the wealth of other written words and guidance, we have what we need: a unified, somewhat unified acceptance of a goal to around which everything is centered, going toward that. Could be obviously a unifying thing. It helps to dissolve the ego, which right there allows the psychic to advance.
Coming back to the silence intuitive meetings Monique was talking about earlier, I kind of envisioned our communities sitting in Kalabhumi in silence and and just letting whatever wants to come up, come up. And then the next thing that came was like, wow, would I be able to do that? Do I have enough trust in the community that is there to really intuitively say out what I have to say? Would I feel respected in my opinions, even though they are coming from a higher place? But this judgment that you just mentioned, all this is part of what's going on in us and in our creation of human unity. The multicultural aspect of Auroville, which is a huge challenge, I think, to bring ourselves on a level where we can all speak the same language and all be understood. And this is the inner being and the connection and the psychic level. So yeah, when I project myself in a meeting like this, it kind of scares me, really. But I mean, I would be excited to try it, really.
Love. I just want to say a word about love. I think that there are an awful lot of people in Auroville, everywhere in fact, not only Auroville, that feel really unloved, alone and lonely, unseen, unwanted, not loved. And in my opinion, that is one of the chief big tools in the devil's toolbox. It's a real negative feeling and thought not to be entertained, not to be allowed in the door, because we are not alone. And the concept of human unity, dare I say, human nudity, to be able to be naked in front of one another, so to speak, and to realize you're just like me. Sometimes I feel like that too. Alone, scared, lonely. But the truth of the matter is not that. We are all one. We all come from the same one. If there's another one that made somebody, I haven't encountered that, but I think we're all coming from the same divine. And to have the bravery to step away from those downward thoughts that take us away from the truth. Okay, shall we say the ego steps in and says, yeah, you haven't got it right, you're no good, nobody wants you. It isn't so. It isn't so. And to ask for help. I always come back to that, to remember to ask for help and not wait so long, because it's there. So then when we want to talk about organizations and having meetings, coming together in a group, we have to have that courage to ask for it as a collective, to be able to see the truth. Sri Aurobindo also said, I think in thoughts and aphorisms, courage and love. If you have those two, they will save your soul alive. So courage, coraggio, be willing to take a step and say, yes, I need help because we're all in this together and we're all alike on some level. And isn't it great?
Yeah, I've been to Findorn and I came here and slowly I'm sitting in a working group that we have a silence in the beginning. And mostly, many of the groups that I worked with, we had a silence beginning. But maybe I could suggest in my group to say, let's be silent and see for an answer on this and this particular case. let's see if that works. Let's see if that works. Not everybody likes to do it. It's like something is like more like a routine than really asking for guidance and really asking for connecting on a high level together. So that was one idea that we got from it. And I know that it could work. And another idea I thought is like, maybe we don't need to sit and begin with the full community and trying to do it. Maybe we could take small steps. And I know that at one point when there was a problem in a community, then which was also predominantly Tamil people, they said, bring some gray hairs when you discuss it. Like bring some wise old ladies, old people that actually could speak from experience and be because there's a natural respect also. So maybe we could now we having this kind of meetings, we could do it on a small scale and become like a small council of wise women. We could give it an experience, we could give it a try, we could say, well, practice what we're preaching or practice what we know, and how could we experiment with anything like that? Can we make, in the old cultures there were councils of wise women and wise men, and now times are going so fast, evolution is going fast forward, and technology is going faster even so. But maybe in having gone through a life experience in many ways, being mothers, being partners, we have done a lot, and even in the Indian culture, then after you are above a certain age, you turn to the spirituality. Maybe this is where we are. Most of us are at the brink or are already deeply into it. We do have more time for our psychic. We have more need for being with that part of ourselves. And personally, I feel, I don't know if it's only me, an enormous spiritual pressure at the moment. I don't even need to sit an hour of meditation, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I go zoom, we're uploading a lot right now. That's I don't know, it's only me, but I think everybody feels it. There is something happening very strongly. And I don't know if it's the supramental or whatever it is, but we are definitely on the brink of something new. And I would be willing and open to kind of experiment more with it as a group. Let's start small and see where we can go. Yeah.
I want to celebrate that it's becoming very real for me to love the mother, and as a result of today's experience here, I can add something else because I like things simple. For me personally, be worthy of trust.
Well, I think that was a perfect ending to our circle of today. Thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this testimonial. If you would like to take part in this project on the inner being, or if you have any questions or comments for our team or participants, please feel free to contact us using the email at the bottom of this webpage.
This is Auroville Radio, voices from the city of Dawn.